Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Jason Mashroli, and going to take you through today with Frank and Tim. Today's topic is adding AI features to existing products, really to drive client value. And so really this is anchored strategically kind of right before Thanksgiving as you're wrapping up this year to think about how you can quickly leverage Launchpad to build out new AI and agentic features as you go into 2026 to drive your revenue next year. And so with that, I'll talk a little bit about Launchpad as a new model for SaaS product development. For folks who've already been on, it's a little bit new content, but also a little bit of a rehash. Then we'll get right into building AI and agentic features with Frank, and then into a demo, and then Q&A. And then just like we always do, feel free to drop comments in and questions into the chat, and we'll take those at the end. And we'll get into it. So again, Frank Apap is joining me. Frank runs our Launchpad Provider Success team, which is really on a mission to really help all of our builders and providers that are building on Launchpad to be the most successful with the platform and get the most out of the platform. And so, always getting huge rave reviews for Frank and the team, and Tim is part of that team, and Tim is going to be supporting today with the Q&A. And then I am Jason Mashroli. I run go-to-market for Launchpad. I also run our corporate venture fund, Pega Ventures. So as I said, we're rounding out and completing the series of webcasts that we've done here. This is the fourth one in a series. If you haven't seen the others, certainly check those out on our website or our YouTube channel. And so really the way that these built out is, we first talked about Launchpad as a new model for AI and SaaS product development. Then we did a deep dive into AI blueprints, which is leveraging our free edition, Launchpad Explore, which you can sign up for on our website to really build and prototype applications. Then the last session we did was really how do you build an agentic workflow product. And then today's session is going to dive into, if you've got an existing product, how you build out AI features leveraging Launchpad as a platform. And so really thinking about what's happening today. And so often when I'm talking to, CEOs and CTOs and teams, especially the ones that have really kind of bought into Launchpad and really kind of it's clicked for them. This is a lot of things that we talk about. So, we see folks that are, kind of pre-AI era companies, mid-tier SaaS companies or startups that, typically have, traditionally done full stack development. And they're seeing lots of tech debt accumulate. They're seeing their development and delivery cycles slow down. And they're at the same time seeing a lot of, these fast AI native companies at the top end of the market, hitting numbers like $100 and $200 million in revenue within, 1, 2, and 3 years. And so it's creating an interesting, stressful year in 2025, I think, for a lot of us in the software industry. And, at the same time, I think a lot of buyers are also delaying spend and also exploring what they're going to do with AI, how they're going to, kind of rationalize and maybe reduce their spending on SaaS companies and the number of vendors as well. And so, often, I think at the beginning of this year, companies were like, okay, great, we're going to jump into vibe coding, AI-based development. But I think what a lot of folks are starting to realize is that, some of those tools create kind of brittle applications after the excitement of getting started. It starts to get hard to actually build things and build them into true enterprise applications. And I think the reality is that, folks are also finding that they're not great for, generating predictable outcomes, and also, really custom coding a lot of the things that Launchpad gives you, for free, as we say, really can drain a lot of scarce talent and, puts a drain on your engineering team. And so really the shift that we see with Launchpad, which is really kind of a unique player in the space, which is we have AI development, which we've shown you and we'll show you today as well. But what's different is it's a model-driven approach. And so we're not generating code. We're actually generating the UI, the data, the workflows, the integrations, all within a model. And that model is very predictable. And then that leverages AI for runtime in terms of using LLMs or creating agentic flows. And so really gives a huge efficiency gain to organizations that are building on it. And so really we're looking to help companies kind of accelerate their development 5-10 times the speed of traditional approaches, and really help kind of companies that are under strain today, trying to figure out, how they're going to innovate and really stay relevant and deliver more value in 2026 and beyond to really get there fast and have a platform that's going to scale with them as well. So a lot of times at Pega, which we're part of, and our platform has really been proven over the last 40 years, and a lot of the same capabilities we've built into Launchpad is the center out agentic architecture. And so we really believe in building out the data, the workflows, the case management, all of the business rules really centrally. And then that connects into all of the various channels and personas. And then it also connects into either data that's resident within our platform or any of the different data connections that you want to have into an enterprise data source, data warehouses, other data sources, public data sources, and so on. And so this is a really unique approach that has worked well in large scale enterprise. It's worked well for software companies adopting Launchpad. And so you'll see this in action as we start to build this out today. So one of the things I've said every time is that there are three reasons that folks come to Launchpad. One is to build new products. So this is great for either startups or existing software companies that want to build new products and take those to market very quickly, or organizations that want to enhance an existing product, which is really what we're focused on today. And then we also have organizations coming to us to say, hey, look, we've got a lot of technical debt. We're being slowed down. And basically they want to leverage Launchpad to replace and basically re-platform onto Launchpad entirely. And so with that, I'll just wrap up with kind of the journey. And this is kind of the flow that we've gone through in some of the webinars as well. And so I encourage you, if you haven't already done it, go to our website, sign up for the free version of Launchpad Explore. That gives you full access to our AI, Gen AI blueprint capability to basically prototype and ideate and start to build out your application. Once you've done that, you can easily use our unit estimator to basically estimate the cost based on the outcomes and case processes that you've got. And then in the full development experience, once you subscribe, you can basically finish off your application and take it to market. And with that, I will turn it over to Frank.
All right, thanks, Jason. So let's just recap where we are on this webinar series, right? So we decided that we were going to build a governance, risk, and compliance application. So this is often referred to GRC. These types of applications are there to take enterprises through their compliance and auditing requirements for different compliance frameworks like SOC 2 and ISO and other things like that. So we started with a blueprint a few weeks ago where we used Pega Blueprint and Gen AI to ideate the different workflows that are critical to a GRC application. And in the following week, Tim imported that blueprint into the Launchpad Studio and configured the rest of the application. This included things like the user experience, reporting, more details in the workflow, like things like routing and SLAs, all in a low-code manner, writing no code and deploying it to a live subscriber in about 35, 40 minutes. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to innovate that same application with two different types of AI functionality. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to look at two different flavors of AI that Launchpad provides. The first is what we call Connect Gen AI. So Connect Gen AI is AI capabilities that are a single prompt and a single invocation of an LLM. So you can think about this as kind of you directly working with your favorite LLM for a single, request and response. These are easily integrated at specific parts of your workflow. Okay, the data that comes back from that could either be, a single piece of text, like a chat response, like you're used to with ChatGPT, or it can be structured data that maps into individual fields in your case and workflows. Now, one of the important distinctions about Connect Gen AI is it is just an LLM call. You can embed information in the prompt, but there are no tool calls to external services. Now, if we compare that to our second flavor of AI, which is the Pega agent architecture. With Pega agents, the agent orchestrates multiple LLM calls back and forth in an effort to achieve a given outcome. Now, these agents are often interactive and have multi-turn experiences where the user goes back and forth with the agent. Now, that's not actually a requirement. You can have background agents that work completely autonomously, but in a lot of cases, the agents go back and forth both to the LLM and to the user. And one of the real distinctions between agents and the Connection AI feature is the ability to call tools. And the tool really is a very generic way to either access pieces of data or take actions both internally in the system in our workflows, or you can even make external system calls as part of the tools that the agent has access to. And again, you control what tools an agent has access to. Now, the last point here is that Pega agents are a little different than what you hear in the industry and a lot of the agentic frameworks, in that part of the agent's definition is that it understands the workflow it's working against. And it uses that workflow to help drive the actions and tools it calls. So the prompt is way less important in a Pega agent because it's actually utilizing the workflow definitions, which is really how we're able to create much more predictable agents than a lot of the other AI frameworks. So with that, we're going to implement 2 use cases for these 2 flavors of AI. The first one with Connection AI is we're going to do a vendor lookup. So often as part of GRC applications, you assess the vendors you work with as a company. You want to make sure that you're not taking on any risk by working with risky vendors. So we'll use an LLM to help both pull information that the LLM understands about these organizations, but then also use that information to do a preliminary risk analysis. The second use case is we're going to build a chat with my audit agentic chat experience, where we'll define an agent that has access to all the information through tools about what's going on in a given audit. And again, an audit usually involves multiple tasks, if not hundreds of tasks, with tons of people involved. And often it's kind of hard to understand exactly what's going on. So we're going to use a agentic chat to achieve that. So with that, let's get down to the real business here. So I'm going to switch to my screen. Okay, move that off the screen. All right, so you guys should see Launchpad. Here we are with our U Plus Gen GRC application. This is sort of where Tim left the application off last week. And now I'm going to continue by starting with that first use case for the vendor lookup. So I'm going to go into my Gen AI connectors. You'll see that I have one for a totally different use case already here. But we're going to create a brand new one. And we're going to call this one Use AI to Look Up Vendor Details. The description is use AI to look up vendor information and risk scores. The class that we want this to run against is our vendor assessment. Now, one interesting thing here is you can actually leave this checkbox checked, and Launchpad will use the description you gave it to create your prompt for you. Now, I have a very specific use case that I'm trying to implement here. So to save some time and having to correct what it generates, I'm going to cut and paste directly a prompt that I played with in preparation for this call. But I'll explain a little bit about what's going on in this prompt. Here you can see I'm basically telling it to look up the name of a company as input and gather some information from its knowledge of that company, and then give it a risk score between 0 and 100. And I explained to it, that 0 is a low risk and 100 is a very extreme risk, and that I wanted to increment in increments of 20. Importantly, I'm also telling it to return that information as JSON. This is what's going to allow me to take the fields and map them to individual fields in my case, as opposed to just getting like a bunch of text that I have to read through. Both types of patterns where you return like a more human readable response or JSON have their place. In this use case, I'm going to use the JSON. And then I give it some things to try to help it avoid hallucinating answers, because when I first tried this, it was just making up information. So I'm doing that. And last but not least, something to nudge it to make sure it only gives us the JSON, so I can easily use our JSON transform to map that. Now, in the user prompt is where I'm going to tell it which vendor I actually want to do this lookup for. So you'll see here I cut and pasted some boilerplate text, but I'm going to actually replace vendor name with an actual field reference. So this is coming right from our case. I just pick here the vendor to assess and the vendor name. So the only information I'm actually going to pass to the LLM is the name of a company. And then down here, you'll see the models that we support. For this use case, I think Haiku is good. Probably don't want it being too creative with coming up with information about another company. So I'll give it a 0.1 temperature, give it a little room to be creative. So now that's it. We've created what Launchpad needs to know to be able to call an LLM. And all we really need to do is we have two more steps to make this happen. One, because we're using the JSON approach, we have to map that JSON to our case structure, which is also really simple. And then the last step is going to be adding it to our workflow. So really quickly, I have a JSON mapping that I already did beforehand because I don't think you want to see me dragging and dropping lines for 2 minutes. But this is really simple. Basically, you take the same JSON you told the LLM that you want it returned. I cut and pasted. This is literally straight from the prompt. That generates the fields on the left-hand side that we're going to get back from the LLM. And you literally drag and drop the lines from the field that you have. So here, AI risk score goes to AI risk score. Right? So you see the little line there, and the risk reason, because it explains why it gave that score, maps there, as well as the other fields. So this interface allows you to map the output from the AI JSON to your actual case structure, which is your vendor assessment. Now here, a lot of the names are exactly the same. They don't need to be. You're just dragging and dropping and mapping. You can also perform certain transformations as part of this. If you need to capitalize things, make things lowercase, etc. So that's really powerful as well. So last but not least, we have to put this in our workflow. So we have a vendor assessment case type, and we already have logic that gets vendor details. But when this is getting it from our actual database. But if this is a new vendor, we don't have this information yet. So all we're going to do is we're going to add a step here that says, hey, we want to call the use AI to look up vendor details capability. And that's pretty much it. We add it into the workflow when it's a new vendor. Click save. And we are now ready to test. So I'm actually going to bring over from my other monitor the runtime of this application that I deployed. Right, so this is the same application that's been automatically deployed. Somebody's icon's popping up on my screen. And now we're going to run a vendor assessment. Okay, so new vendor. Let's say we want a new vendor. First one I'm going to say is, let's say we're going to start working with DocuSign, a popular company. So right now, this is where the AI is executing our prompt. It's returning the JSON gets mapped. So you can see the fields actually mapped to the individual fields. It's not one, big text blob that says DocuSign's phone number is. It's mapped to individual structured pieces of data. It determined they're a gold tier company, gave me some information about them. And if I actually go to the next step, you'll see that it performed an AI risk assessment, saying that the risk is relatively low, a risk of 20, and it even explains to us why it gave that score, telling us they're a well-established company with over 20 years, strong reputation. Now, just to see that AI isn't going to, that this isn't hard-coded and AI knows what it's doing, we'll do one more vendor assessment, this time for FTX trading. For those who don't know FTX trading, they are a cryptocurrency company that had a couple of run-ins with the law over time. So here it did downgrade them to silver. I'm actually surprised it's not bronze. I couldn't find any information, so it said unknown rather than making up a phone number. But what's interesting here is when we go to the risk assessment, it gave it a much higher risk rating, basically because they're involved in cryptocurrency, they have a limited history, and thus AI is telling us, hey, we think this is a little more risky. So hopefully this shows you this is obviously just one example of how AI can be used in specific spots of a workflow to either automate decisions, like we could have put a business rule in that said, if the risk rating is over 50, auto reject them, or to help guide human users to be more efficient and to kind of guide them towards the practices that your business wants. So that sort of rounds out use case 1, which is using Connect Gen AI to run a prompt in a specific spot of our workflow, get that information, and map it directly back into our case. So now we're going to move on to use case number 2. And that one is building a AI agent. So for a brand new AI agent, we're going to click over here, pick agents, and we will now create a brand new AI agent. All right, so we're going to call the agent the audit agent. Its description is understands the entire audit process, something like that. It applies to our audit case type. We're going to, for this one, we'll switch up the models. We'll go with GPT-4o. And now here's where we give the agent some instructions. Again, I'm going to cut and paste, but you'll see here that with the agentic stuff, you tend to have to be a little less verbose because it's going to use the workflows and use the case definitions to really drive the concepts. What I did give it here is like some synonyms. So as a human is interacting with the conversation, it understands that like the term task is actually implemented as our control assessment case type. And that when we need information about a person, we have a special tool that can look up information about that person. And we'll configure that tool in just a second. So as we move down this form to fill out the rest of our agent, we start with data sources. So data sources is actually an interesting concept. Data sources are similar to tools, but unlike tools, they are executed and inserted into your prompt automatically. So the agent doesn't itself decide that your data sources need to be available. You decide that, and it gets sort of attached to the prompt automatically. So in this case, we definitely want a data source, which is our audit data, right? So it's pretty important here is that we know what audit we're looking at. Now, to pass that, it's pretty simple. We take an existing data page that gets generated by the platform. This is our execute audit lookup. And all we need to do here is pass it the ID of the audit that we want to be talking about. So primary.id, pretty simple. Validate that, looks good. So now what that's doing is making sure that when the LLM runs this agent, it has the audit data it needs to be able to answer the questions you want. Next, you can give it a starter question. I'm going to actually skip that. And you can also give it quick select questions, which we will do. So quick select questions are basically little buttons that prompt the user to say, hey, you may want to ask this question. So start with one called summarize the state of this audit. And maybe we'll do a second one, who has outstanding tasks to work. Additional instructions don't get shown on the screen. They're used to help the LLM to help further refine the LLM's prompt. I don't think we're going to need them for this use case. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the big capability that agents have is the ability to have tools. So knowledge tools basically are things that look up data, and action tools are things that take actions either on the case or can call external systems as well. For this case, we do need a specific knowledge tool, and the knowledge tool we're going to need is the find compliance officer by ID. And yes, I am missing the word, the R in officer. All I have to do here is pick and select the tool. What this tool is going to do, and we'll look at it in just a second, is this tool allows the agent to look up information about people who are involved in the audit. So the audit only tracks like the email address of or the ID of a user who's assigned a task. But we may want to know more information about that person. We may want to know their name or if they're on vacation or other information like that. Creating this tool allows the LLM, or allows the agent, I should say, to dynamically call it with a specific parameter. It will take care of passing that parameter for you of the ID of the compliance officer that you want to look up. So we've created our agent. Really quickly, I'll show you the tool that we're calling just so you can see that tools are not anything particularly complex themselves. In this case, because it is a knowledge tool, we're just using data page concepts to look up that information from our personas. So you'll see here, find compliance officer is just making a call to our compliance officer lookup data page. Again, that was generated by the platform. You didn't have to build that. And passes it the persona ID, which is passed as a parameter. And what's really interesting here is that while there's a parameter here, you as the developer aren't involved in passing that parameter. The agent infrastructure understands the tool requires a parameter and understands when it needs to set that parameter for you. So that's all you need to do is tell it that you want to call that tool. So we've got an agent. It's got some tools. Our next step is to connect that agent to the screens that we want it to be displayed on. So for this use case, our audit case type that we have here, we'd like to add an agent. So we start over, we can go add agent. It's literally click a button, pick here which agents you want. Again, you can define multiple agents, so that's why you have to select which agent. I'm going to pick the audit agent, click save. And we've now created in essence, a chatbot agent that understands our audit case type and what's going on in it. So let's see that live in action. So I will pull back up our runtime environment. I will find an open audit. We've got one going on here. And now you'll see that I have a little agent. You can click the button on the side. Here's our two pre-submitted or preset questions. So you can just click one. I'll check in and say, let's see who's got some outstanding tasks to work on. The agent's running. It's making calls to the LLM. It's also making a call to the tool because it needed to look up the names of the people. So I have some tasks as well as my colleagues, Ron Burgundy and Ricky Bobby. But now I can ask it some other questions. So like, let's see, can you summarize the entire audit? So now it's going to go and try to summarize the audit. So it's finding information like who's the audit owner, when was it due, how many total tasks were there, how many have been completed, what are the tasks, their status. It went and decided all of that just based on what was in our prompt and the conversation we're having right now. I can ask it something a little different. How late is this audit? So, the current date is November 20th. It said here it was due on October 27th. So again, this is just the LLM now using that information to do some basic calculations. And again, you can now continue this conversation. The context of your conversation will automatically be passed as you continue it. You can also have some fun with this. Hey, where do I know the name Ricky Bobby from? In a movie? And the LLM, because it has access to that, figures out, oh yeah, that's a fictional character from Talladega Nights. If you didn't want it to do something like this, in your prompt, you could say things like, do not use external external knowledge, only use information from the tools. But one of the fun things about chatbots is the ability for them to feel like they are real people that you're communicating with. So that really wraps it up. In about, I think I was talking for maybe 10, 15 minutes. We were able to implement 2 different AI use cases, use the information from an existing app, get it live, and the UX for the screen. I didn't have to do any work here building a chat UX. That was all part of our platform. I will mention everything you've seen is also API driven. So if you wanted this chat to be part of another chatbot, you can use AI APIs to communicate back and forth with the chatbots or with the agents. But yeah, this is really powerful stuff.
That's awesome, Frank. So I guess you work with a lot of different tools that are available. what would it typically take, in other approaches to do what you just did versus Launchpad? And how is Launchpad different?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest way it's different is that, especially with our agent capability, um, it's using its understanding of the model to understand concepts like due dates and things like that. So the prompting is way less important. Like the term prompt engineering became popular a few years ago. Launchpad does not want people to have to become professional prompt writers. There are tips and tricks that I think are helpful, but the fact that we're able to use the workflow and use the model's definition is really what makes it so that you can spend a lot less time kind of tweaking, going back and forth. I'm not going to say that it's like always like perfect on shot one, but it's way less than working with other tools. The other thing is it's all integrated. So accessing the data is just using things like data pages that you have accessible to you because they've already been created in your application by part of your blueprint ingestion or other parts of your workflow. Whereas if you were building something like this, you often would have to create a database lookup and worry about securing the data so that PII isn't added. Here, the Launchpad takes care of that stuff for you. Also, in terms of just getting started, one of the things you may have noticed, I didn't set up an API key. I didn't have to go register with OpenAI when I wanted to use GPT-4 and then Anthropic when I wanted to try out a different model. Launchpad provides access directly to all the models that we support without you having to set up anything. There was no magic, behind the curtains there.
And if people want to use their own, they can do that as well, right?
Yeah, so we support this in sort of two ways. One, we provide models where we provide the keys, and it's just like what I showed. You can also use our integration capabilities to connect to any model, manage the keys yourself. In the future, we also will be supporting the ability to kind of bring your own key to our supported models. But that's sort of down the roadmap. Right now, it's really you either can do it yourself with REST integrations or sort of single click solutions, as I showed.
Awesome. And then in terms of future potential and ideas for people on how they could use this, because this was a very quick use case that you gave, like
Yep.
what are some of the wild things that people could do in terms of like orchestrating work and getting some of this stuff done, in terms of adding this capability into a product?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a wide spectrum of ways you can do this, right? There's the whole like what I would call the chat with my blank category, chat with my data, chat with my reports, um, to make it, complex amounts of data more accessible. Then the other pattern that I didn't show today is what I would call like the research pattern, where you may have background agents running and using tools to do things like web searches, or using custom tools that your given enterprise has built to access information behind the scenes and actually just get work done with like no humans involved. Then there's sort of the human in the loop pattern where you may have background agents that churn on data, decide what they can and can't do, and then route things to humans for the next steps. These are all different possibilities that you can configure depending on what fits the use case and your appetite and your customer's appetite for autonomous behavior. Right? That's a big part of this as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And Tim, I think you've got some questions as well. Do you want to bring those up?
Yeah. Do we want to? Okay, let's see. So I got one from the audience here, and then a few more from other channels. So Frank, you showed that find compliance officer by ID tool that was really just using a data page that had already been created by Launchpad behind the scenes. So could we basically use any rule as the tool with the agent to interact with?
Yeah, so tool is a wrapper around two types of rules: data page and automation. Um, so, and then those rules can call many other rules. So in essence, yes, you can use just about any rule in the system to run, to kind of implement your tool, including REST connectors. So that's another powerful pattern. Obviously, with a live chat agent, performance becomes a little bit of a potential challenge depending on the performance of your back-end system. But in like a research agent, I absolutely would imagine you may have tools that are calling REST connectors through the data page interface.
Mhm. And related to that, so you had this tool that's used by that agent that you created. Are these tools usable across different agents? Like the same tool can be used by different agents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. So one of the things that I expect, and now our agent capability is relatively new, is that people are going to start building up a library of sort of useful tools for a given application, making each subsequent agent even easier to build and more powerful because they'll just be kind of connecting the tools that they think are relevant for a given use case.
Okay. Another question that came in. So you showed using the AI agent conversationally from within a case as they're working on the case. Can we also use AI agents, say, from a portal or dashboard?
So the answer is right this minute, we don't have that, but that is actually, I think, one of the very next enhancements to our agent functionality that is coming. I don't want to quote a date because I'll get it wrong, but it is definitely like one of the next things that's being done on the agentic roadmap. It's probably worth mentioning. We in no way believe that the agent functionality we have right now is like 100% done. We know there are lots more enhancements that can be made, ways to schedule agents, way to route work to agents. These are all additional concepts that will be coming in the very near future.
Cool. We have one more question that came in. So do you see a world where we would have something like a tool or agent marketplace for Launchpad?
I could see that. Yeah, I mean, similar to sort of how we have the boosters. If you're not familiar, if you go to launchpad.io/boosters, those boosters are in essence like a free marketplace for integrations. We could absolutely create boosters for different types of tools and then eventually allow people to contribute within the community.
Cool. And I think that's the questions that we have now that have come in.
Great. Fantastic. That was awesome, guys. And hopefully everybody enjoyed that and got a lot out of it. We went very fast and it makes it look so easy in terms of how to build this stuff out. But if you've got questions or ideas that you want to discuss with us, we're happy to help. So just reach out to us. If you haven't already, if you're not already using Launchpad, sign up for Launchpad Explore for free, get started with Blueprint and start to build out your use cases. And then now that you see, how all this stuff can be built out once you get, kind of the full development experience, I think you can start to see some ideas on how you can leverage this for next year. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. We've got a What's New webinar coming up on December 11th, talking about a lot of the new capabilities that are recently being released. And we're also going to be at AWS reInvent in a couple weeks, right after Thanksgiving. And so we'd love to meet you there if you're going to be there at the event. And we'll have a booth and we've got a lightning talk. And so we're very excited to unveil some new stuff at reInvent as well. And with that, we'll wrap up. Thanks, Frank and Tim. That was great.